Continuing the audiobook, Dreams from Our Founding Fathers, First Principles in the Age of Obama, written by Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. Now, real quick, I just wanted to share with you guys, there is a playlist of all of the readings starting at the very beginning. It's here at the Florida Maquis main channel titled Gov DeSantis, and it's the first 6 parts taking you up all the way through page 44, where we begin today. What was sometimes lost in the controversy that permeated the political debate at the time was the reason Reverend Wright's particular brand of Christianity appealed to Obama, the hitherto irreligious community organizer. As someone who traveled in a homogeneous political environment for virtually his entire life, and as someone dedicated to organizing a mobilized grassroots for redistributive change, it should not be surprising that Obama was attracted to Wright's Trinity United Church, for Wright's theology was as much a theory of political activism as it was a religious doctrine. When he first met with Wright to discuss his desire to enlist Chicago area churches in his organizing activities, Wright even warned him that his church might be a burden to his organizing efforts because of its perceived political radicalism. This is because Wright embraced what is known as black liberation theology, which put a premium on political activism. As Wright later explained in his Trumpet News magazine, there was no separation biblically and historically, and there is no separation contemporaneously between religion and politics. The Word of God has everything to do with racism, sexism, militarism, social justice, and the world in which we live today. The brand of theology reinforced the already existent political philosophy that Obama had developed, and the fact that Wright's church offered more than mere piety attracted him. Not all of what these people sought was strictly religious. Obama recalled of his first service at Trinity, it wasn't just Jesus they were coming home to. It occurred to me that Trinity, with its African themes, its emphasis on black history, continued the role that Reverend Phillips had described earlier as a redistributor of values and circulator of ideas. Obama also appreciated the collectivist perspective championed by a church like Trinity, which assured its members that their faiths remained inseparably bound, that an intelligible us still remained. It wasn't until Obama heard Reverend Wright's sermon, The Audacity of Hope, that he decided to embrace religion and join Trinity. Wright infused his sermon with political references to Sharpsville and Hiroshima, the callousness of policymakers in the White House and in the State House. He cited a painting titled Hope, in which a harpist appears to be situated on a majestic mountaintop, but on closer inspection there is a valley below, where everywhere are the ravages of famine, the drumbeat of war, a world groaning under strife and deprivation. According to Reverend Wright, ours is a world where cruise ships throw away more food in a day than most residents of Port-au-Prince see in a year, where white folks' greed runs a world in need. This type of social justice bent is exactly the type of message that a community organizer fixated on redistributive change would be drawn toward. Obama later explained that Wright's Christianity spoke to me in terms of the kind of life that I would want to lead, being my brothers and sisters' keeper, thereby providing a religious justification for major redistributive change. After his community organizing days in Chicago, Obama continued to operate in environments that were overwhelmingly, if not monolithically, far to the left of the American political center. His first stop after organizing was Harvard Law School because he wanted to receive an education on the currency of power that he thought would have compromised me before coming to Chicago. The things he would learn, in law school could, he wrote in Dreams from My Father, help me bring about real change. When he returned to the Windy City, Harvard seemed like the perfect place for this. Obama's father received an education, if not a degree, at Harvard before returning to Kenya to re-engineer African society, and Harvard's leftist ideological orientation was very similar, if more elite, than the environments in which he had previously marinated. During the late 1980s, the bitter faculty squabbles at Harvard were completely detached from the prevailing national dialogue. The debates in the nation's federal judiciary pitted conservative originalists who believed the Constitution possessed a stable meaning against progressives who saw the Constitution as evolving through judicial improvisation, yet the debate at Harvard seemed to be between institutional left and the avant-garde, deconstructionist left. The academic battles pitted faculty members deemed conservative at Harvard, but who would, in the broader political society, be aligned with the establishment left wing of the Democratic Party. against those considered to represent the real left, so-called critical legal theorists that were so radical they considered law to be an expression of an oppressive social and economic status quo, rather than grounded on neutral principles. For example, Roberto Mangiera Unger, a critical legal theorist who taught 2 elective classes taken by Obama, described himself as a leftist and by conviction, as well as by temperament, a revolutionary. Needless to say, in such an environment, the Founding Fathers are persona non grata. His election to the presidency of the Harvard Law Review earned Obama national acclaim because he was the first African-American elected president of what is generally considered to be the most prestigious law review in the country. The national reporters that covered the story naturally inquired about what the newly elected law review president planned to do. After graduating Harvard, Obama dismissed the opportunity to net a clerkship with the U.S. Supreme Court or a lucrative job with a large law firm in favor of working in the inner city to build community institutions and organizations. I'm not interested in the suburbs. The suburbs bore me, and I'm not interested in isolating myself, he told a reporter for the AP. I feel good when I'm engaged in what I think are at the core of issues of society. And those core issues to me are what's happening to poor folks in this society. For Obama, the choice was clear. He would return to the south side of Chicago and continue the work he began as a community organizer, though perhaps not only as an organizer, but also as an elected official. From the point of view of his political influence, it is interesting that Obama considered moving to Chicago's Hyde Park as a way to prevent isolating himself. Of course, Chicago's south side was not isolated from the problems that affect the typical American city, and this is likely what Obama meant. Even if Hyde Park is not especially considered part of the South Side, still the Hyde Park neighborhood in which Obama chose to live, both as a community organizer and when he returned to Chicago after graduating from Harvard Law School, was and is one of the most monolithically left-wing political communities in the United States. This says something about Obama's outlook, for he was focused on a potential political future, and at least after Harvard, he could have chosen to live and work wherever he wanted. As fellow Hyde Park resident and Obama advisor John Rogers told USA Today, what better way to define what you're all about than where you chose to live and bring up your family? It would be difficult to find a neighborhood with more political homogeneity. Homogeneousness? Hard to say. In the 2004 presidential election, the 2 wards that include Obama's neighborhood and the nearby University of Chicago preferred John F. Kerry over George W. Bush by a margin of 95 to 5%. This was precisely the type of environment that suited Obama. Only in such an environment could a former Weather Underground terrorist like William Ayers be regarded as a respectable member of the community. Ayers' background is contemptible. He is responsible for numerous bombings of public buildings, including the Pentagon. He dedicated his book Prairie Fire to Sirhan, the assassin of Robert F. Kennedy. He called for a communist revolution and for followers to, quote-unquote, kill your parents, and told the New York Times in an article published on September 11, 2001, that I don't regret setting bombs. I feel we didn't do enough. It is indisputable that Ayers has never apologized for his past crimes and speaks of America as if it is the focus of evil in the modern world. Yet in Hyde Park, Ayers is considered to be, in the words of one Hyde Park resident, nothing more than an aging, toothless radical, a pussycat that had a violent streak at one time, but who is now thoroughly conventional, just a very nice, well-educated person from the neighborhood. When ABC's George Stephanopoulos asked Obama about his relationship with Ayers in a televised debate during the Democratic primaries, Obama noted that Ayers was a professor of English, which is a very respectable position in Academic Center Hyde Park. Though it is not clear to what extent he shared any of Ayers' ideas, Obama clearly had more than a passing relationship with Bill Ayers. He had a campaign meet and greet at Ayers' house when he launched his first campaign for the Illinois Senate, which was an opportunity for Obama to meet with some of Hyde Park's most influential leftists. He received a $200 donation from Ayers to his Senate campaign in 2001. He headed the Chicago Annenberg Challenge, which was the brainchild of Ayers from 1995 to 1999. He served with Ayers on the board of the Woods Fund, a group dedicated to social justice, and Obama reviewed Ayers' books, A Kind and Just Parent, The Children of Juvenile Court, which he called a searing and timely account of the juvenile court system. Obama was quick to point out that knowing somebody who engaged in detestable acts 40 years ago, when I was 8 years old, somehow reflects on me and my values doesn't make much sense. It may be true that a connection to heirs tells us nothing about Obama's own personal views, and it is true that Obama has never advocated advancing his leftism through violence, but the fact that Obama had, at a minimum, a casual working relationship with someone like William Ayres tells us an awful lot about the Hyde Park circles in which he traveled. Even though he had never apologized for his crimes, and in fact reveled in his criminal behavior, writing that he was guilty as hell and free as a bird, what a country, and even though he continued to regard the United States as a terrorist state, Ayres was a member of good standing of the credentialed elite in Hyde Park, the type of academic that was particularly respected in the upper crust of the city's progressive political scene, and that would habitually find himself participating in initiatives like the Woods Fund and the Chicago Annenberg Challenge. Needless to say, Hyde Park is one of the few communities in the entire country in which such a disreputable figure would be considered a respected voice on matters of public policy. Given the almost uniformly left-of-center political environments in which Barack Obama traveled throughout his life, it is hardly surprising that when he finally decided to throw his hat into the ring as a candidate for political office, he did so under the banner of the Democratic Party, which is the natural home for someone on the political left. Obama had said that he is someone who is no doubt progressive, and it is the progressive impulse that has been one of the party's driving intellectual forces for most of the past 100 years. Today, progressivism is primarily associated with the Democratic Party, but the Republican Party has also produced prominent progressives such as Herbert Hoover. The extent to which progressives have dominated the Democratic Party has varied over the years, but suffice it to say that candidate Barack Obama leveraged the support of the party's progressive wing to catapult him to the Democratic presidential nomination in 2008. The origins of the progressive movement lie first and foremost in a dissatisfaction with the Constitution of the United States. Though progressives were eager to make wholesale revisions in the nation's governing charter, they were frustrated that most of their supposedly unenlightened contemporaries held the Constitution in extremely high regard. Writing in 1885, Professor Woodrow Wilson complained that divine right of kings never ran a more prosperous course than did the unquestioned prerogative of the Constitution to receive universal homage. Wilson, though, was delighted that his generation of political elites was the first to engage in free, outspoken, unrestrained constitutional criticism. We are the first Americans to entertain any serious doubts about the superiority of our own institutions as compared with the systems of Europe, and to think of remodeling the administrative machinery of the federal government. Progressives saw the purposeful inefficiency of the Constitution as embodied in the separation of powers and checks and balances to be no longer effective in an age that they thought demanded quick, unified governmental action to meet the nation's needs. So critical of the Constitution were members of the progressive movement that many cheered when Charles Beard's An Economic Interpretation of the Constitution criticized the framers for constructing what he characterized as an undemocratic governmental system that served to protect their own economic interests. As progressive historian Richard Hofstadter noted, Beard's book attacked the heart of American civic life. A nation of Constitution worshippers and ancestor worshippers was confronted a scholarly muckraking of the Founding Fathers and the Constitution itself. Reducing the affection that the American people had for the Constitution and its creators would pave the way for progressive reformers to usher in a new constitutional framework, even if only through new creative ways of interpreting the existing Constitution that would leave its form undisturbed but would nevertheless serve to transform its meaning and operation. Progressive criticism of the Constitution was rooted in the desire to vastly expand the power and scope of the federal government. The Founding Fathers placed a premium on individual liberty when they designed the Constitution, structuring it to prevent the government from doing harm, even if this meant that positive governmental action would be inhibited. Progressives were of a different mind. They were collectivists whose philosophy subordinated individual liberty to the needs of the nation's government. In The Promise of American Life, the prominent progressive and Constitution critic Herbert Crowley indicted the Constitution's dispersal of power and emphasis on individual freedom as the major roadblocks to a candid, patient, and courageous attempt to advance the social problem towards a satisfactory solution through government action which he acknowledged was flagrantly socialistic. According to Crowley, the only way this problem could be solved was by reviving the practice of vigorous national action for the achievement of a national purpose. Indeed, the nationalizing of American political, economic, and social life necessarily pointed towards a more scrupulous attention to existing federal responsibilities and the increase of their number and scope. Rather than reconfigure the actual constitutional structure, progressives like Woodrow Wilson proposed to fundamentally transform the very nature of a written constitution. The Founding Fathers considered the Constitution to be fundamental law with a stable meaning, but progressives dismissed this supposedly mechanical Newtonian view of the Constitution in favor of a Darwinian outlook that saw the nation's governing blueprint as a living document. The Constitution, Wilson argued, is not a mere lawyer's document, but a vehicle for life, and its spirit is always the spirit of the age. No living thing, Wilson continued, can have its organs offset against each other as checks and live. On the contrary, its life depends upon their quick cooperation, their ready response to the commands of instinct or intelligence, their amicable community of purpose. Because the living Constitution rested in large part on the opinion and practice of each generation, Wilson sought to transcend opinions and practices of each. Okay, let's see if we can start this again. Because the living Constitution rested in large part on the opinion and practice of each generation, Wilson sought to transcend checks and balances by altering the manner in which Americans viewed the Constitution. The public would need to look past the scheme of congressional supremacy, as Wilson labeled the actual structure of the Constitution, and see the presidency as the most legitimate source of national political authority, thereby enabling more federal action. Then the people needed to turn to a man who understands his own day and the needs of his country, and who has the personality and the initiative to enforce his views both upon the people and upon the Congress. The result would be a vast increase in the size, scope, and power of the federal government, and an evisceration of the constitutional safeguards carefully designed by the Founding Fathers to protect individual liberty. One of the upshots of the progressive impulse is the need for a small group of wise individuals to plan and administer the ever-expanding menu of federal initiatives. Progressives tended to frown upon the rough and tumble of politics in favor of the implementation of ostensibly nonpartisan solutions devised by experts. An example that captured the progressive impulse of Wilson's time was an awful novel, Philip Drew's Administrator, written by Edward Mandell House, who Woodrow Wilson described as his second personality, and as someone whose thoughts and mind are one. House considered American institutions, such as the Constitution, to be deeply flawed, and thus dedicated the novel to the unhappy many who have lived and died lacking opportunity because, in the starting, the worldwide social structure was wrongly begun. In the book, Philip Drew leads a revolt against the government and assumes the position of dictator of the United States. He then organizes a commission of 5 lawyers to devise the correct policies, and he implements them by executive fiat, claiming they will benefit the many instead of the few. This has been a long-standing progressive dream and can be seen today, for example, in the expressed desire of New York Times columnist Thomas Friedman that America suspend its constitutional republic and adopt China's totalitarian regime for a day so that controversial policies advocated by wise men like Friedman can be adopted by dictatorial decree. Obama certainly shares the progressive affinity for the notion that superior government lies in empowering experts to devise and then impose upon the public comprehensive solutions to pressing national problems. When, as President Obama was asked by a reporter about a number of unsavory deals that had been engineered in Congress to help secure passage of Obama's massive and controversial health care law, he replied that he would have loved nothing better than to simply come up with some very elegant, academically approved approach to health care, and he didn't have any kind of legislative fingerprints on it, and just go ahead and have that passed. But he lamented the fact that it is not how it works in our democracy. Unfortunately, what we end up having to do is to do a lot of negotiations with a lot of different people. As columnist George F. Will pointed out, by lamenting that he could not simply impose a plan, devised of course by academics, on the American people, Obama, the self-described progressive, showed himself to be Woodrow Wilson's kindred spirit, a president disenchanted with the limitations on government's power that Madison and his brethren so effectively built into the Constitution. Indeed, at one point, Obama even told people close to him that it would be so much easier to be the president of China. Though he projected an image of cool, cerebral centrist during the presidential campaign, many of President Obama's policy initiatives charted an unabashedly leftward course. His first 2 years in office represented the most liberal governance the nation has seen in nearly half a century. Indeed, unlike other modern Democratic presidents such as Bill Clinton and Jimmy Carter, who both grew up in southern states and developed a familiarity with political thought beyond left-wing progressivism, Obama's entire background and experience has been rooted in the philosophy of the political left, and his worldview reflects this cramped intellectual upbringing. With this in mind, it is not surprising that Obama's transformational project represents a decided break from the principles relied on by the Founding Fathers when they created the Constitution. How could he keep faith with the philosophy of the Constitution's creators when that philosophy conflicts with the set of beliefs ingrained into him by the various sources of influences in his life? From the dreams of central planning he received from his father to the redistributionist credos of the likes of Saul Alinsky and Jeremiah Wright, even if he were inclined to embrace the nation's founding principles, his embedded belief system renders him incapable of recognizing the founders' achievements or building on their success. He seeks transformational change because that is all he knows. He is a prisoner of his own narrow political worldview. That is the end of section 4 at page 52, and we will pick up reading section 5, the philosophy of liberty, on page 53 next time. Thank you very much. God bless, and have a great day.